Now, this is another thing we don't have time to talk about business, and I'd like to do that as a whole separate workshop. And we were just talking about that at lunch break, because we've done sections of Living the Field just on work in the field, and it's a whole other issue. But I want you to just keep this in mind when you're looking at your life in relation to everything else and looking at negative intention. Competition is negative intention. Now, we don't think of that. We foster competition. And, and I've got a very sporty younger kid, and I'm oftentimes there at her matches going, yes, go! And because I'm, American, we've got all these very polite English people kind of quietly cheering, and I'm there being the loudest mom in the, in the sidelines there, yelling and screaming for Anya. But I think about that, and I come away and I think, well, okay, how do we now tell our kids, this is just a game, this is what you shouldn't be doing in real life? And I think that this is something we should just stop long enough to think about, because competition permeates every bone of our body. And remember, competition is I win at somebody else's expense. It is about my significance at the expense of someone else. And I just want you to think about things in another way, which is, it is possible, perfectly possible, to run your business, to work in your job, and not be competitive. You don't have to watch and note, make mental noting about how other people fail, because that isn't going to make you any more significant than you are already. And if we're all connected, if they fail, you fail. You don't have to run your business to beat out all your competitors. I've been interested in collecting stories of people where everybody gets ahead by sharing data. It's possible to go out there and be cooperative. I hope I gave you a little glimpse of that. The animal kingdom is very interesting because there's very little gratuitous killing. There's very little gratuitous killing. People talk about, oh, no, it's all about competition and only the strongest survive. Not true. An animal eats because it needs to. An animal doesn't kill gratuitously. We're the only animal on earth that kills gratuitously. And so in that sense, we're the most competitive of all. It's not mirrored in the animal model. So step back for a moment. You don't have to teach your children about being significant by being an individual at other people's expense. That is a negative intention, because in a sense, you are saying, I win, you lose. Now, I put this up as one of the awfulest, ugliest pictures I can think of myself, because I want to illustrate things that happened to me, in a sense, by accident. I heard of somebody else. Wasn't there somebody in the audience talking about their force field and how they broke things? Didn't somebody say that in the audience? Yes. Do you have an effect on equipment, is it? You have an effect on equipment. So do I. But I'll tell you about that in a minute. I also seem to have, I'm fearful that I might have an effect on people when I'm in a bad mood, too. Brian and I, 9 years ago, moved into a house in southwest London, and we got an Art Deco house. And it was a wreck when we got it, and we decided to take on the project of renovating this. And we thought, well, we both love Art Deco, so we'll make it Art Deco. So I spent a lot of time, and we spent a lot of hard-earned cash putting this house back together. And we had just moved in 3 weeks later, and I had a very sweet cleaner who was very over-enthusiastic with the scale removal. And as you know, if you're not from England, you may not know this, but for anyone in England, we have very hard water here. So she's scrubbing along, and I get back from work, and I see that she has accidentally scrubbed off all the chrome and all the brand new taps in the house. So I die a quiet death. I go to my bed. I freak out. I don't know how to discharge my anger. She's already gone home. And I scream and yell, and I hit some pillows. And I learn the next week that at about the time I was doing that, she fell off the bus and broke her leg. So I wondered to myself, did I do that? And I had a similar experience some months later. As you know, if you're from England, everything in our banks is controlled by direct debits and by computer. And one month, Brian and I noticed that all of our checks, all of our direct debits were bouncing. Our mortgage payment was bouncing. Everything was bouncing. And we were freaking out, thinking, this shouldn't be. And so we found, to our horror, that the bank didn't register one of our paychecks. And I was so angry about this because I know even with that kind of mistake, it affects your credit rating and this and that, et cetera, et cetera. Mortgages, lenders aren't very patient about such things. So I was irrationally angry and just had to be angry at something or someone. So I directed all my anger at my bank manager. Now, she had nothing to do with this. She's a lovely lady. But to my horror, the next week, I found that at just about the time I was venting my spleen, she fell on the pavement and broke all of her front teeth. And I started thinking to myself, by this time I'm getting very paranoid, and I'm thinking, don't have a bad mood, and God knows what you're going to do to the teen. So I have no idea if I'm affecting people or not. These could have been strange coincidences. I don't know. But I only put this up to say, if we are leaky buckets, and notice, even in our little practice sessions, when you were sending and receiving, people were picking up changes of thoughts. One of the people in our audience, Aransu, told me that her partner sent her red heart and then changed his mind and sent her sword. Now, the initial thing was she picked up red heart. She picked up the original message, and then she got us change, and she came up with sword, which actually is shaped like a heart, too. I mean, like a flower, too. Oh, no, it was sword. It was flower, and you picked up sword. So that was a bit like a flower. So she was picking up his changes of information almost in real time. And that happens a lot. We hear this a great deal from people doing this kind of experiment. So your unintentional intentions are not locked inside your head. Your anger and frustration at people are not locked inside your head. They're beaming out, and they are affecting people around you at every moment. So this is just, again, a caution to be aware of them, to step back one step and be aware of them. And besides people, to consider everything else around you. There are two kinds of people in this world. There are angels and there are gremlins. And this is actually, scientists talk about this. It's a well-established fact that some people have a positive effect on equipment and some people a negative effect. There was a scientist, dear scientist, called Jacques Benveniste, who has done the work on memory of water. And he found really interesting material that molecules all have a unique resonance, their own unique sound, if you will. And if you play that sound to another molecule, without having the original molecule present, you can affect a chemical reaction. Just the frequency can cause the reaction. So he wanted to convince the orthodoxy of this. So he decided to remove humans from the experiment and just have a robot doing this. And the robot had an arm where it would kind of swing over and mix the material and get a little coil with the sound of a molecule and play it and just do this whole kind of experiment without humans. And he found his robot worked perfectly, except in the presence of one woman. Now, Benveniste was the most charming Frenchman, and he was a terrible chauvinist. In fact, and he was very funny, too, because I met him during the time of the Monica Lewinsky scandal in America with President Clinton. And he turned to me and said, "We French, we can't understand this. Our president would be impeached if he didn't have a mistress." So I loved that story. So he said to himself, thinking this woman is the cause of all of this, cherchez la femme, look to the woman. And that, of course it's going to be a woman, as he said. So he thought to himself, well, there's something about her force field that's ruining this machine. So who would the machine love? And he thought, well, the machine's probably going to love its inventor. So he brings the inventor to the machine, and the machine starts working again. So he thinks, well, I can't have the inventor around. The machine's happy, so I'll put an electromagnetic shield around it and shield it from this woman. And when he did, the machine would stop working altogether. So then he thought, this is probably going to be a little bit like witchcraft, but I'll give the inventor a little vial of water to hold for 2 hours. So he does that, He takes the vial of water, he sticks it inside the electromagnetic shield, and from then on, the machine works perfectly. So just as there are enhancers of equipment, there are also detractors. I am a gremlin of the first order. I have a terrifically bad effect on equipment. Friday, my staff was in stitches because I did something and I practically erased my entire hard drive. It suddenly, everything on my desktop just suddenly disappeared. If I'm in an agitated mood, which is only occasionally, I start breaking every piece of equipment in our office. I break computers, and then there was one time I was really agitated. I broke one computer. I went, ah! I went over to another computer. I broke that. And then I went over to the photocopier to photocopy, and that stopped working. And at that point, my staff started edging me toward the door. So there are enhancers and detractors, and I just want you to consider that when you are in a bad mood, you are sending out to your environment, including your inanimate equipment. We have so much evidence from the random event generator studies that you have a profound effect on electronic equipment. So just bear it in mind.